Bob Lewis Richard Boyes, who went by Bobby, was born on February 5, 1959, to Jane and Richard. He was one of 5 siblings, 3 boys and 2 girls, and grew up in a rural stretch of Port Republic, Maryland, where the Boyes family lived on a 10-acre property. During colder months, they stayed in a mobile home to save on heating costs, returning to the 2-story house during warmer seasons. Bobby was a gentle, kind-hearted child who loved the outdoors. He shared a close bond with his sister Joy, who was only 3 at the time. She recalled that Bobby never roughhoused like their other brothers and that she enjoyed playing quietly with him. One of Bobby's most unusual and beloved companions was a pet deer he named Pete. The two were often seen together, with Bobby leading Pete by a metal chain. Christmas Day, 1968, was one of Joy's last memories with her brother. She remembered sitting behind him, combing his hair as he played with a new Fort Apache toy set. That Christmas, Bobby received a treasured gift, a shiny new pocket watch, which he immediately adored and carried with him for the rest of the day. The next day, December 26th, 10-year-old Bobby put on a plaid shirt, dark pants, brown leather boots, and a dark blue coat. With $2 in his pocket, and almost certainly his prized watch, he left with his brothers to visit the nearby Hance family. After a morning of showing off their Christmas toys with the 5 Hance boys, Bobby's brothers decided to head home for lunch, while he chose to stay a little longer. Shortly after, a neighbor washing dishes saw Bobby walking down Wash Hance Road with Pete by his side. They rounded a corner and disappeared from view. Pete returned home alone, the chain still around his neck, but Bobby never did. At first, the family wasn't overly alarmed. Bobby often wandered the woods and creeks nearby, but as the sun set and temperatures dropped into the low 20s, concern deepened. At 7:30 p.m., Jane and Richard contacted the police. A search was launched that night and continued into the early hours. The following morning, it resumed with even greater intensity. Helicopters scoured the skies, divers searched ponds, and ground teams combed the woods. The 5-mile radius around the boys' property was thoroughly searched, but no trace of Bobby was ever found. Investigators spoke with neighbors. One confirmed seeing Bobby with Pete. Another, whom Richard had accused of abducting Bobby, had been at work that day and slept at his nearby farm that night, an alibi police confirmed. Attention soon turned to Bobby's home life. At school, Bobby was described as a sweet and intelligent student, though his teacher noted he often arrived dirty and needed to clean up before class. At home, both parents were known to have drinking problems, and Richard's history included a disturbing confrontation in which he pulled a shotgun and later threatened his stepfather, Clarence, with a broken bottle after a family dispute. Jane and Richard were both asked to take polygraph tests. While Jane passed, Richard's results showed deception, especially when asked, "Do you know where Bobby is?" and "What happened to him?" Richard later claimed he failed because he suspected a particular neighbor was involved, but as mentioned earlier, that neighbor had already been ruled out. Police also noted that Richard and Jane appeared unusually calm during the investigation, with Richard at times seeming irritated by the questioning. Shortly after Bobby's disappearance, the boys' 2-story house burned down, causing the death of their family dog. Richard claimed the dog had knocked over a lamp, but Bobby's brother John recalled he and another sibling had accidentally set the couch on fire while playing. Believing they had extinguished it, they returned to the mobile home. The fire likely reignited after they left. However, Jane always believed Richard had started the fire deliberately. Years later, Joy requested fire records but was denied access. In July 1970, while Jane was in the hospital giving birth, Joy shared a disturbing memory. She told her mother she had seen her father taking nude photographs of underage relatives on a mattress outside their home. Richard, an amateur photographer, had a dark room in the shed where he developed film. When police originally searched the property in 1968, Richard had reportedly hidden a stash of inappropriate child material inside that same shed. This revelation prompted Jane to finally leave him. She packed up her 5 children and moved to San Diego to live with relatives. Not long after, Richard called Jane and asked for the boys back, saying he didn't want the girls. Jane refused and filed for divorce. Further revelations deepened suspicions. Years earlier, when the family lived in Florida, during a brief separation, Richard had allowed a 15-year-old boy to live with him. Around that time, Bobby confided in Jane that a teenage boy had lured him away and sexually abused him. It's unclear if it was the same teen living with Richard. On the day Bobby disappeared, Richard claimed he was at work, but that was apparently never confirmed. Since it was the day after Christmas, most people believe he had the day off. Plus, one of their neighbors reported seeing him near a church that afternoon. And perhaps most damning of all, just 2 days after Bobby vanished, Richard handed someone Bobby's pocket watch and asked them to keep it safe. In time, Joy severed all ties with her father, who later remarried and had more children, including 2 stepsons. She remains convinced her father was responsible for Bobby's disappearance. Richard Boys died in 1996 at age 59, and Jane passed away in 2019. Though decades have passed, Bobby's siblings, especially Joy, remain committed to keeping his memory alive and pushing for justice. Given the frigid conditions that winter, many believe Bobby's body was disposed of in the nearby Chesapeake Bay. Ice forming along the shoreline could have hidden it temporarily before decomposition gases lifted it to the surface, only to eventually sink deeper into the bay, lost to time. It's a grim theory, but far more plausible than burial in the frozen ground. According to Bobby's brother, police abandoned the case within days of his disappearance. There were no follow-ups, no continued interviews, just silence as if it had all been swept under the rug. In 2009, the brothers sat down with the Hance brothers on video to revisit the events of that day. Still no progress was made. With each new revelation, Richard's violent temper, his disturbing interest in child photography, the dark room, the concealed pocket watch, the suspicion only grows. Some believe Bobby may have been murdered by his own father, possibly after resisting abuse or threatening to tell. The 7-hour window between his last sighting and the time he was reported missing would have provided ample opportunity to cover up such a crime. Bobby Boys went missing on December 26, 1968, and as of April 2025, he has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. In March 1996, the skeletal remains of an unidentified woman were discovered by workers in a wooded area off the 17,800 block of Falls Road in northern Baltimore County, Maryland. She was found wearing blue jeans, a light-colored blouse with dark pinstripes and pearl buttons, a leather jacket, high-top shoes, and 2 gold hoop earrings. Investigators determined her body had been in the woods for at least 5 years. With no missing persons report ever filed, her identity remained a mystery, and she became known only as Road Jane Doe. For decades, detectives had little to go on. A facial reconstruction was developed using her skull, and computer-enhanced images were released in hopes someone might recognize her. Then, in April 2021, a breakthrough came. The Baltimore County Police Department partnered with DNA Labs International, who created a DNA profile from the remains. The lab's genealogist then used that profile to build a family tree, generating investigative leads. Baltimore County detectives conducted follow-up interviews and testing based on these leads. In early 2025, Road Jane Doe was identified as 20-year-old Leoria Smith. Leoria had vanished in 1984, but her disappearance was never reported to the police. At the time, she was the mother of an infant daughter, Tiara Ashby. Tiara, now 40, never knew what happened to her mother, only that she was gone. Detectives now believe Leoria was last seen celebrating her birthday at the Underground nightclub, located in the 2100 block of Edmondson Avenue in Baltimore City, in November of 1984. A tipster told police that this might have been the last place she was seen alive. Leoria had attended Glens Falls Park Junior High School in the late 1970s and early 1980s, but what happened to her after that night at the club remains a mystery. Her death is considered suspicious, but an exact cause of death has not been determined. Now that her identity is known, detectives are asking for the public's help, asking anyone who knew her or who may have seen her out at that club, not just that night, but ever, to contact them. Leoria Smith was found murdered in March of 1996, and as of April 2025, her killer has not been located, and this case remains unsolved.
Everybody loves Megan.
Everybody loves Megan. Karen could be like Robert.
Megan McDonald was born on May 2, 1982, and grew up in Middletown, New York, alongside her older sister, Karen, and two younger half-brothers from her father's side. A 2000 graduate of John S. Burke Catholic High School in Goshen, Megan was known for her warmth, compassion, and deep love for animals. She often took in stray cats and had a unique ability to make others feel welcome, a quality her sister said made it feel like you'd known her forever. At 20 years old, Megan was attending SUNY Orange in Middletown and working as a waitress at the American Cafe and the Galleria at Crystal Run in Walkhill. She was at a turning point in life, having just signed a lease for her own apartment and preparing to embrace adulthood on her own terms. On March 13, 2003, Megan worked a morning shift at the cafe and later stopped by a birthday party at Greenway Terrace. Though she didn't go inside, she spoke with a few people outside. That evening, she visited a friend's home in Middletown, where they watched the TV show Friends together. Megan left just after midnight, telling her friend she needed to get home for work the next morning. But instead of going home, she returned to the Greenway Terrace area. Around 12:30 a.m., two acquaintances saw her in her white 1991 Mercury Sable and said she implied she was meeting up with someone. After that sighting, Megan was never seen alive again. When she failed to show up for work or return calls the following day, concern quickly grew. On March 15th, her body was discovered in a remote, wooded area off Bowser Road. She had been brutally bludgeoned to death, and her driver's license was used to confirm her identity. Days later, her car was found abandoned at Kensington Manor Apartments, only 470 feet from the home of her former boyfriend, Edward Hawley. Megan had suffered a skull fracture, multiple facial fractures, and a broken collarbone. Defensive wounds on her hands suggested she fought back. Forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Sakirika concluded she was likely killed outside the car due to minimal blood found inside, though DNA evidence, including bloodstains and DNA from both Megan and Holly on her cell phone, suggested the vehicle played a role. The case remained unsolved for years, but in January 2024, Edward Hawley was indicted for second-degree murder. Hawley, who had been in a wheelchair since a 2007 car crash where he was arrested for DWI, had long been on investigators' radar. In a 2019 interview with police, Hawley claimed Megan had recently told him she was pregnant and expressed concern over her cocaine use. He later made an ominous remark, "Someone has to take the blame for this." A jailhouse witness testified that Hawley confessed to strangling and striking a woman after being made to sit in the back seat of a car. Meanwhile, another of Megan's ex-boyfriends, Paul Simpson, who she had a volatile relationship with, was also considered a suspect but later ruled out. DNA from him and Megan was found on a cigar butt in her car, but his vehicle, a black Dodge Neon, was determined not to be involved. Another person of interest, Andre Thurston, a friend of both Megan and Holly, told police Megan had come to his house looking for marijuana the night she died. He claimed he sent her to find Holly instead. Thurston died in 2010 of a drug overdose and was never charged, though investigators believe he may have been present during the murder. An eyewitness at Kensington Manor, Dawn Young, provided inconsistent accounts over the years, but eventually described seeing a white car that looked like Megan's being followed by a dark hatchback-style vehicle with a loud sound system. Investigators believe this second vehicle is key and urge the public to help identify its owner from 2003. Detectives theorize Megan was killed between 12:30 a.m. and 8 a.m. on March 14th, possibly by someone she trusted. They believed 2 people drove her car back to Kensington Manor after the murder and left in the dark hatchback. More than 700 items of evidence have been collected, and cybergenetics' True Allele software was used to reanalyze the DNA. Unfortunately, the DNA linked to Holly was considered a statistically low match. Despite setbacks, including Holly's brief release in 2023 due to protocol errors, the case moved forward with renewed momentum. Holly's trial began in March 2024. Prosecutors focused on his relationship with Megan and alleged lies told over the years, arguing the injuries reflected a rage-fueled personal attack. The defense pointed to alternate suspects, including Simpson, and told jurors to scrutinize the strength of the evidence. Unfortunately, the first trial ended in a mistrial due to jurors being deadlocked. They had requested clarifications on phone records, police statements, testimonies, maps, and physical evidence, a sign of how serious they were weighing the complex and deeply emotional case. One of Holly's defense attorneys, Christopher Sevier, asked Judge Hunton Kim to not declare a mistrial and allow the jury to continue to deliberate, but his request was denied. Megan was murdered on March 13, 2003, and as of April 2025, the main suspect has not been convicted, and this case remains unsolved. Patrick Leo Cotrona was born on January 26, 1980, in Troy, New York, but later moved with his family to Peachtree City, Georgia. He was the middle child between 2 sisters in a close-knit household. He was so precocious that he could read by age 2. Patrick was a curious kid who lived in books. His parents often had to practically force him outside because being sent to his room to read wasn't a punishment. At McIntosh High School, he thrived academically and graduated in 1998. He earned scholarships to Georgia Tech, where he felt like he finally belonged. Surrounded by fellow tech minds, Patrick blossomed. He graduated summa cum laude in 2003 with a degree in computer science and a minor in Japanese. Patrick loved video games, board games, reading, and writing. He had a collection of over 2,000 books and was a regular at DragonCon. He traveled widely, spending time in France, South America, and Japan, always eager to explore. After college, he worked at a successful tech company where his skills were recognized, but eventually he followed his heart to a job in video game development, which he loved. Around 2008, Patrick bought a house in East Atlanta. He loved the eclectic, artsy feel of the neighborhood and often walked to the nearby East Atlanta Village for dinner, drinks, or live music. On May 25, 2013, during Memorial Day weekend, Patrick and 2 friends decided to head to a local pub. Around 10:50 p.m., as they walked along May Avenue, a dark sedan pulled up. A man jumped out, struck one of Patrick's friends with a blunt object, pulled a gun, and demanded money. Patrick, always calm and non-confrontational, reached for his wallet to comply. Without warning, the gunman shot him in the stomach. One friend retaliated by spraying the attacker with mace, which caused him to fire off another shot that grazed another friend in the leg. The attacker then fled in a car. Neighbors rushed out after hearing the shots. Patrick was still conscious at first, screaming in pain, but his condition quickly worsened. He was taken to the hospital but died shortly after midnight. His death shocked the East Atlanta community. Patrick was not someone looking for trouble. He was just a thoughtful, talented man going out for drinks with friends. The murder wasn't an isolated incident. That night, a married couple had been robbed in Cabbagetown, and another man was held up shortly after. Ballistics matched all 3 shootings to the same gun. A police sketch was released based on descriptions from witnesses depicting a young man, possibly 16, with a baseball cap. Unfortunately, it never led to an arrest. Theories circulated, including gang initiations, but no solid evidence ever surfaced. The gun, vehicle, and any digital trails from stolen items vanished. Detective Scott DeMeester, who took the case, called it one of the most frustrating cases of his career due to the random nature of the crime. Patrick's sister Kate struggled to stay in Atlanta afterward, haunted by memories. She eventually moved away, but remained involved in the case, calling for justice. By 2017, the case had gone cold. In 2023, to mark the 10-year anniversary, the Atlanta Police Department released an age-progressed sketch of the suspect. The hope was that someone would finally recognize him, but that never happened. Patrick Leo Cotrona was murdered on May 25, 2013, and as of April 2025, this case remains unsolved. Shakimia Sharez Pate, lovingly called Shasha by her family, was born on October 29, 1989. When she was 8 years old, she was living with her family in the small town of Unadilla, Georgia, when she strangely disappeared. Shakimia was described as full of life. She loved skating, dressing up, and going to church with her family. But behind her bubbly personality, she had some serious health issues that included chronic asthma that needed breathing treatments, a weak bladder that meant she wore pull-ups, a kidney condition that had required surgery, and a leg brace for a displaced kneecap. September 4th, 1998, started like any other Friday. The town was buzzing because it was football night, which was a pretty big deal in Unadilla. Shakimia was especially excited because she was supposed to go to the game with her big sister, LaSwanda. That evening, neighbors were out chatting, playing cards and dominoes, and kids were running around playing. It's safe to say that Crumpler Avenue that night, where the Pate family lived, was very lively. Shakimia was playing outside near their home, right across the street from Roxy's, a combination convenience store, nightclub, and pool hall. Roxy's was popular with locals, including kids, even though it had a reputation for attracting some shady activity like drug dealing and gambling. Still, people let their kids hang out there. Around 6 p.m., LaSwanda drove past and saw Shakimia on a neighbor's porch. She may have even tried to wave her down, but LaSwanda was running to get gas and figured she'd swing back by to pick her up. However, when she returned a short time later, Shakimia was gone. One neighbor said they saw her walking up the street, while another said she had stopped by to eat a hot dog. The last known sighting of her was around 8:30 p.m. near the corner of Crumpler Avenue and West Street, just a short distance from her house. At first, the family thought maybe she had gone ahead to the game or was playing with a friend. But by the time LaSwanda got home after the game and Shakimia still hadn't shown up, the panic set in. At that point, her mother, Veronica, called the police, but was incorrectly told she had to wait 24 hours to report her daughter missing. That misinformation cost the case valuable time. However, family and friends didn't wait and began searching the streets that night, calling for her and checking everywhere they could think of, but sadly, no sign of Shakimia was found. The next morning, nearly 14 hours later, someone at the Dooley County Sheriff's Office finally learned about the situation and launched a proper investigation. From there, things picked up fast. Local, state, and federal agencies joined the search. They used helicopters, search dogs, four-wheelers, and went door to door. Neighbors let them search every home in a 6-block radius. But even with all those efforts, there wasn't a single solid clue. Because of her medical issues and the way she disappeared so quickly, investigators believe she was likely taken by someone she knew and trusted. One theory is that she thought her sister wasn't coming back for her, and someone familiar offered her a ride, someone who had other intentions. There's even a chance she had a medical episode, like a severe asthma attack, and whoever was with her panicked and tried to cover it up. There were a couple of persons of interest. One was Quentin Droopy Kendrick, an 18-year-old neighbor and friend of the family who lived only a few houses away. He was one of the last people known to see Shakimia. Years earlier, he had pleaded guilty to a sexual assault, and later in 2001, he was charged with a series of violent crimes against girls aged 11 to 18. He's now serving 3 life sentences. Despite that, Veronica has never believed Kendrick had anything to do with Shakimia's disappearance. In the years that followed, the Pate family followed every lead. In 2012, a Facebook photo of a girl who looked just like Shakimia sent investigators all the way to Detroit, only to learn it was her cousin, and the photo had been shared by a family member. Then in 2022, a woman from Missouri reached out, claiming to be Shakimia. She said she'd been kidnapped and abused, and even shared personal details. For a moment, it gave the family hope, but a DNA test proved she was not Shakimia. Investigators say there is a second person of interest they are looking into, but they haven't released any names. In 2023, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age-progressed image showing what she might look like at age 33. When she disappeared, she had black hair styled in braids with gold beads, brown eyes, pierced ears, and a surgical scar on her waist from kidney surgery. She was wearing a neon green Atlanta Braves jersey with red lettering, Levi jeans, and her leg brace. Shakimia Sharez Pate disappeared on September 4, 1998, and as of April 2025, she remains missing, and this case remains unsolved.